Welcome back. So senators from both parties in the United States have withdrawn plans to seek an immediate assessment of South Africa's eligibility for the African Growth and Opportunity Trade Preference Program. The bill was introduced by Senators Chris Coons, a Democrat, and James Risch, the top Republican on the State Foreign Relations Committee. Now, the new bill seeks to renew Agoa for 16 years, that's through to 2041, and help countries implement strategies to take advantage of the program. But let's discuss the development, and for that I'm joined by Brook Spector, who is Daily Maverick Associate Editor. Brook, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you at all surprised that you're seeing with this withdrawal by both parties?
Not particularly surprised. The basic issue, as far as I can gather, is that the U.S. Congress, House of Representatives and Senate both, there is so much legislation and controversy on other more pressing matters that are directly relevant to the United States and its government and that are hotly contested, that there may not be much time for such an activity. The obvious things are the national government budget, the supplemental appropriation that would provide additional defense aid to Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, and strengthening the southern border. All of these are hotly contested. And the House of Representatives, the lower house, of course, is divided between the Democrats and Republicans by just the merest razor-thin margin of a vote or two. And it makes it very difficult to get anything accomplished. But you add into that the fact that they're going to be on break soon enough for the summer, and then after that they're going to roll right into the election campaign for the year 2024. The challenge is that Agoa, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, is not a treaty, of course, it's U.S. law, and it's due to expire in the year 2025, that is next year. And the question is, will it be renewed as it is? Will it be changed? Or will it perhaps even not be passed through at all for the president's signature? And that, of course, may well depend on who is the president in 2025. Donald Trump is well known as a much more protectionist sort of candidate, sort of person than Joe Biden has been. And if that's true, there may well be significant pressures for much more of a quid pro quo. If we allow access to the U.S. market duty-free, he might be saying, you're going to have to allow access for American products duty-free to African markets. And so all of this sets up a scenario where next year, the very terms of an African Growth and Opportunity Act may well be up for grabs.
Right.
Then there is the other little point, which is that the Act, as it stands now, already sets out the conditions in terms for being eligible, and one of those is a periodic review of economic and political transparency, freedom, and so forth.
Yeah. Do you think that had we seen that assessment, though, of South Africa's eligibility for Agoa actually go ahead, that could have cost South Africa the agreement?
Well, it might well have cost South Africa's eligibility, or it might simply have been a shot across the bow saying you really need to pull up your socks, metaphorically speaking, and in parentheses, you need to stop being so vociferous in your one-sided neutrality on certain international issues, and that certain members of the government need to be just a touch more circumspect in the way they describe these things. So the very act of a review of eligibility is not the same as ending eligibility, of course.
Yeah. So, what we're seeing, though, when you talk about South Africa's positioning on some of the global issues, and I think it's really difficult to ignore the fact that may be a factor here. I mean, do you think that it is, especially when you start to see that South Africa's government is continuing to dig its heels in support of the people of Palestine? Is this going to continuously be, I suppose, a negotiation issue between the U.S. and South Africa over whether or not South Africa stays in Agoa as a result of that positioning that South Africa's taken?
Well, strictly speaking, it's not a negotiation at all, because the the eligibility criteria and the act itself are not treaties, and therefore they're subject solely to the discretion of the Congress and then ultimately to the president. But keep in mind that when a country A, B, or whoever, makes statements about foreign policy and international affairs, they should expect that there may well be consequences from other countries that tend to disagree with them. And the vociferousness with which South Africa pursued the question of Gaza and the way in which it went about its statements of neutrality, if not its actions in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, obviously captured the attention of some people. And by some people, I mean a number of members of Congress, as well as some people in the media and some people in think tanks. And probably most importantly, some staffers in Congress. And one of the things South Africans should keep in mind is that American members of Congress, senators and House of Representatives members both, are not notably subservient to the statements of a party leader in most cases. They all think of themselves as leaders in a country. They all think of themselves as independent thinkers, and many of them think they could be better presidents than the ones that happen to be president. And so there's not quite the same relationship between Congress and president as it is here between parliament and president, and that weighs in the way in which the discussion gets phrased.
All right. What is it that South Africa needs to be doing right now to improve relations with the U.S. in your view?
I have a sort of an unorthodox kind of feeling about this. One of the things South Africa could do would be to take a much stronger stance on the continent in cases like the two-edged chaos and fighting and conflict in Sudan, for example, to be much more assertive in trying to resolve that fighting, to be much more aggressive in its stance on Eastern Congo. And I note that the president has now decided that more troops will be dispatched to aid peacekeeping, but more of that. And in general, a statement and followed by actions about the way in which the countries of the Sahel should be kept out of further militarization. And by doing that, I think Americans in Congress, in the White House, other places, might well see South Africa taking a much more positive role in peacemaking and peacekeeping than perhaps they see it now. That's my suggestion. I don't think that DIRCO is listening to this, but I do hope maybe they might think of it on their own.
Yeah, they might very well be watching. Who knows? But I think just before I let you go, Brook, I want to ask you this. We are essentially on that road towards the 29th of May elections. And the world obviously going to be watching what comes out of that election, and certainly what sort of positioning then the new leadership of the country will then take when it comes to some of these bigger geopolitical matters on the globe. What is it that is of great concern for South African-U.S. relations post the 29 May elections?
Well, I think the biggest thing that really is if you were to look at that horizon, is the tone of the relations. Statements emanating from this country's government that essentially have a texture of sanctimoniousness, that seem to ignore the idea that if you poke the bear in the cage with a stick, the bear gets angry. In other words, there are consequences to statements as well as actions. And I do hope that the tenor and tone of foreign relations might change somewhat to that understanding that just as South Africa says it has interests, that the interests that the United States argues that it has are taken cognizance of. That, in other words, a greater tone of civility and understanding in the texture of public statements might be useful. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't help that South Africa still sits on that grey list. I mean, the likelihood that U.S. relations are impacting on that as well as a factor for the country.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, but keep in mind, too, that South Africa has a lot at stake in having good relations. It has a trade surplus with the United States. And there are several key industries, automobiles and processed agriculture, and that includes good quality wine and processed fruits. They impact directly in the United States. They do well. They have a significant component of employment in this country, and that, of course, has an effect on the national economy as well, and jobs. And it seems to me it behooves South African government officials to be attuned to the fact that they need to encourage those things rather than take a tone that is truculent or sanctimonious or simply we're above these kinds of discussions. And that, again, that's a matter of tone rather than specific, I think.
Yeah. What do you make of the wording of the DIRCO Minister, Naledi Pandor, essentially saying that bringing South Africa to its knees would be self-sabotage even for the United States?
Yeah, that's not the kind of language that is helpful.